Hello, police. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. The following newspaper article comes from the Evening Echo, dated the 12th of December 1997, with the headline, "Frost and Snow Put Trio in the Clear." A lawyer has poured cold water over the evidence of Supergrass Darren Nichols in the triple murder Rettendon trial. Graham Parkins QC said snow and ice were not found on the Range Rover containing the victims' bullet-ridden bodies, even though it allegedly stood in wintry conditions. Nichols, who claimed to be the getaway driver, told the Old Bailey jury at an earlier hearing that the shooting was around 7 p.m. on December 6, 1995. A farm worker and his friend made their grisly discovery in snow-covered Workhouse Lane the next day, and police visited the site at 8:20 a.m. Mr. Parkins added that if Nichols' evidence was to be believed, the Range Rover would have had to have been parked there for more than 13 hours. However, Mr. Parkins believes the vehicle was driven there after midnight, which would account for the lack of snow and ice. He said it was a curious feature of the case that the vehicle was frost-free. There had been snow that night. The barrister criticised police and Home Office pathologists for not determining the exact time of death and not checking weather conditions with the Met Office. Mr. Parkins, who represents Michael Steele, 54, told the jury, "No one even felt to see if the vehicle's bonnet was warm. The whole thing is a mystery which needs to be explained. You may think it was an incompetent start to a major murder inquiry." He said no clues at the scene linked Steele or defendant Jack Holmes with being there. Mr. Parkins said a DNA test proved negative and there were no fingerprints or footprints which would point to the 2 men. There were no tyre marks showing where the alleged getaway car, an old VW Passat, might have been parked. There were not even signs of leaking car oil on the track or nearby road. Mr. Parkins described the prosecution case connecting Steele and Holmes with the murders as pure speculation. He said the cold-blooded killings bore all the hallmarks of professional hitmen, not the defendants in the dock, Steele of St Mary's Road, Great Bentley, Essex, and Holmes of Main Road, Brockford, Suffolk. Both men deny murder and conspiracy to smuggle drugs. They are alleged to have been associates of murdered drug barons Patrick Tate, 37, of Gordon Road, Basildon, Tony Tucker, 38, of High Road, Fobbing, and Craig Rolfe, 26, of Calshot Avenue, Chafford 100. The trial continues. The following newspaper article comes from the Evening Echo, dated the 16th of December 1997, with the headline, "Syndicate Gunman Executed Car Trio." A mystery drug syndicate may have ordered the triple Rettendon murders the Old Bailey heard. Their target was possibly Pat Tate, who double-crossed them over a cocaine deal, claimed defence lawyer David Lederman QC. He said the syndicate hired a professional hitman to execute 37-year-old Tate and 2 other drug barons. Mr. Lederman added that Tate, a gangster with a long prison record, had many enemies. He had already survived one shooting at his home in Gordon Road, Basildon, where he later recovered in hospital. Mr. Lederman claimed that Tate had upset the syndicate for not handing over their full share from a cocaine deal worth thousands of pounds. The barrister also claimed that Supergrass Darren Nichols, 32, was possibly involved in the syndicate and knew Tate from their days in jail. Nichols admitted to being the getaway driver, but said he knew nothing of the killings. He alleged they were ruthlessly carried out by Jack Holmes, 36, and 55-year-old Michael Steele. Mr. Lederman, who represents Holmes, accused Nichols of being a liar and said he became the prosecution's star witness to save his own skin. He added, "Nichols had something to do with these killings. What it is, we'll probably never know. And what his involvement was with this syndicate, we shall never know." Mr. Lederman insisted there was no forensic evidence to link Holmes and Steele with the heartless shootings in December 1995. Nichols had said that Womes, a hefty former nightclub bouncer, had worn size 12 Wellington boots at the murder scene. There were no such footprints to match that description, added Mr. Lederman. Also, the alleged getaway car, a VW Passat, was checked out by police scientists. They could not find any bloodstains or gunpowder inside the vehicle. The car, described as something of a heap, had 4 different makes of tyres, but none of them showed up at the snow-covered scene in Workhouse Lane, Rettendon. Mr. Lederman, who was into the 3rd day of his closing speech, commented, "It is extraordinary that not one piece of evidence, let alone a combination of evidence, was found at the murder scene to connect the 2 defendants. The crime scene does not support the Crown's case, and there is no evidence to confirm the account put forward by Nichols. The trial continues." The following newspaper article comes from the Evening Echo, dated the 17th of December 1997, with the headline, "Supergrass lied in court." Supergrass Darren Nichols lied and lied over the Rettendon triple murders, a lawyer told the Old Bailey. Nichols claimed he was the getaway driver after the callous killings, but became a police informer to spare himself a murder charge, said defence counsel Edward Rees. Mr. Rees said Nichols wanted to get his own back on 2 men he had fallen out with, Jack Womes 36 and 55-year-old Michael Steele. He also had it in for Peter Corey, who he claimed was heavily involved in drug smuggling operations, added Mr. Rees. The barrister stressed that Nichols himself was into drugs and was a persistent liar steeped in criminal activity. At the same time, the 32-year-old police informer was vindictive and clever with it, said Mr. Rees. The 3rd defence lawyer in the trial to discredit Nichols, the prosecution's chief witness. Mr. Rees, who represents Corey, went on, "Nichols is dishonest by nature. His attitude is you are all corrupt, so do not have a go at me because I'm trying to make a living." Then Mr. Rees asked the jury, "How many allowances are you giving Nichols? You must have considerable unease about his evidence." Earlier in the trial, Nichols, an electrician from Braintree, told how he had met Womes and Steele in prison. They kept in touch afterwards, and Nichols actually worked for Steele, who was rebuilding a bungalow. Nichols maintained he was asked to act as a getaway driver for his ex-prison pals, while they had a rendezvous in a quiet Rettendon farm track with 3 drug barons. He said he waited at the start of the track for the 2 men to return, thinking they had fixed a lucrative cannabis deal. It was only later he alleged that he realised they had shot the drug dealers Patrick Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe as they sat in a Range Rover. Nichols, who was never charged with the murders, has pleaded guilty to drug offences and is awaiting sentence. Their case was adjourned until after Christmas. The jury will return on January the 5th when the judge is expected to sum up in the trial, now in its 16th week. The following article comes from The Law by Kim White, with the headline, "Gangland Killers Jailed for Life." The gangland slaying of 3 drug dealers in Rettendon was always going to be a tremendous task for Essex detectives, but with 2 men starting life sentences for the murders, it was clearly not impossible. The execution-style killing of Pat Tate 37, Tony Tucker 38 and Craig Rolfe 26 by Michael Steele and Jack Womes revolved around an international drugs deal which turned sour. It plunged former Superintendent Ivan Dibley into the biggest investigation of his career, just 4 months before he was due to retire. The detective who took over the inquiry, Detective Superintendent Brian Story, said this week he was both satisfied and delighted by the verdict. More importantly, it has sent a message to all criminals that even those seen as big league are not immune from justice. The verdict comes after an investigation and trial revealing some breathtaking statistics. During the 2-year investigation, a team of around 25 detectives took over 1,000 statements and completed 5,000 actions. During the 21-week Old Bailey trial, the Metropolitan Police applied daily 72 officers to provide round-the-clock personal protection for each and every jury member. The main prosecution witness was in the box almost continuously for an amazing 25 days. The judge took 7.5 days to sum up, and the jury took less than 5 to convict, delivering a unanimous verdict. It was certainly worth the wait, and waiting was something the inquiry team were used to. Superintendent Story explained, "We had an idea very early on who is responsible for the murders, and an early arrest may have provided additional forensic evidence. But there were other risks to consider. The nature of the people involved meant an early arrest could frighten off vital witnesses, and also meant the murderers might restrict their criminal activities. Essex police chose to sit tight, and it paid off. Quote, "We took a calculated risk, but we wanted to ensure that we were in the best possible position evidentially before we made a move," said Mr. Story. The villains were active and dangerous criminals who were aware of how to cover their tracks and conceal forensic evidence, even down to knowing what clothes to wear. Steele also admitted in court that he believed he was under constant surveillance by both police and customs. Ironically, it was the use of their mobile phones and careful analysis which helped secure their convictions. Mr. Story said, "Steele's downfall was partly due to the fact that he thought he was untouchable and thought he would never get caught. By biding our time, we proved him wrong. How long the message will last, I don't know. But the message is that no matter how professional you are or think you are, and no matter how well you have planned your crime or think you have, you are not immune. A meticulous investigation and, of course, a few lucky breaks can make even these crimes solvable." Labelled a one-witness trial, Mr. Story admits that the key prosecution was of vital importance to the investigation. He said, "I always thought we would have enough to make an arrest, but not necessarily enough to convict. We had a lot of information from the public, but very little cooperation came from those close to the victims because of the nature of the crime. The key was getting someone who knew what went on that night to talk. The investigation relied heavily on us using a full range of policing skills. The only way to combat these professional criminals was to use every aspect of policing available, and the outcome is a tribute to all of those involved, not only within Essex Police, but within the other agencies who assisted us, such as HM Customs and Circs, and we thank everyone involved no matter how small their role." Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background, the law publication from which this article comes from is really Essex Police's own fanzine or own personal news publication. It talks of a glowing investigation, and really we know that's not the case. We know there are many, many flaws regarding this investigation. Even if you simply believe that Michael Steele and Jack Holmes are guilty of this crime, I think we can all agree that the way the investigation was carried out is dubious at best. It's also interesting that they mention in this article here that they didn't get hardly any information from those close to the deceased, which is absolutely rubbish. Without Donna Jaggers pointing them in the right direction, they were literally clueless. Once Donna Jaggers had given her statements, it was then down to Darren Nichols to push home the prosecution's case in court. Now, whether you believe that Holmes and Steele are guilty or innocent of these crimes, one thing the majority of us can agree on is that the way in which this crime scene was treated was an absolute joke. The pathology work and the ensuing autopsies were a shambles at best. And some of the underhanded tactics used against Sarah Saunders and Michael Steele actually bordered on criminality themselves. The following newspaper article comes from the Evening Gazette, dated the 9th of January 1998, with the headline, "Treat Evidence of Supergrass with Caution, Murder Jury Told." A judge warned the jury to treat the evidence of Supergrass Darren Nichols with great caution. He said the Rettendon triple murder trial depended largely on the testimony of Nichols, the prosecution's star witness. Nichols, 32, named former jailmates Jack Holmes and Michael Steele as the killers of the three drug barons. The trio was shot after being lured to a secluded farm track at Rettendon near Chelmsford. In his summing up of the Old Bailey trial, now in its 21st week, the judge said, "I need hardly stress the importance of Nichols' evidence. So much hinges on what he said, and it is important you examine every angle, every side. Nichols is a convicted criminal who was engaged in drug abuse and the importation of drugs into this country. You must bear in mind it was in his own interest to become a prosecution witness, and knowing he will come back to court for sentence, he hopes to get less time to serve. Nichols, a paid police informer, is awaiting sentence after admitting conspiracy to smuggle drugs and supplying Steele with a pump-action shotgun. The judge added, "You may consider that because of these matters, you should look on what Nichols has said with great caution." The judge told how 32-year-old Nichols befriended Holmes, Steele and one of the victims, Tate, while in prison. Their friendship continued after the men were released, and Nichols claimed that Steele, 55, got him involved with smuggling drugs in from Amsterdam. He said the operation also included Holmes, 36, and Peter Corey, 45, from Clacton, who is also in the dock on a drug smuggling charge. The following newspaper article comes from the Evening Echo, dated the 15th of January 1998, with the headline, Jury Out in Triple Murder Trial. An Old Bailey jury was retiring today to consider its verdict in the Marathon Rettendon triple murder trial. The jury of 8 women and 4 men has listened intently since September the 1st to a wealth of evidence from dozens of witnesses. The prosecution barristers have sought to prove that Jack Holmes, 36, and Michael Steele, 55, shot dead 3 drug barons with a shotgun. Patrick Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe were blasted in the head after being lured to a secluded farm track in Rettendon. The prosecution timed the shooting at around 7 p.m. on December 6, 1995. During the lengthy trial, defence counsel has tried to cast serious doubts on the credibility of the main prosecution witness, Darren Nichols. However, the judge reminded the jury in his summing up yesterday of a bizarre twist in the case. He said an East End gangster, Billy Jasper, claimed to have unwittingly driven an unnamed gunman, not the defendants, to the area around midnight to carry out the executions. Jasper, a serving prisoner, was allegedly paid £5,000 for the deed. He then drove back home to Woodford, but could not remember the exact day he had done it. The judge told the jury, "You'll have to make up your own minds about Mr. Jasper's evidence." Another witness living near the murder scene claimed he heard gunshots around midnight on December the 6th. Holmes of Main Road, Brockford, Suffolk, and Steele of St Mary's Road, Great Bentley, Essex, were arrested more than 5 months after the shootings. The following newspaper article comes from the East Anglian Daily Times on the 21st of January 1998, with the headline, The Assassins. 2 ruthless hitmen received 3 life sentences each yesterday for the triple underworld execution of drug barons on a remote Essex farm track. Michael Steele, 55, of Great Bentley near Clacton, and Jack Holmes, 36, of Brockford near Eye, both protested their innocence from the dock of the Old Bailey. As the judge said, "There is about these killings a hard, ruthless and criminal edge. You are each dangerous men, who have not the slightest compunction in resorting to extreme violence when necessary." Holmes and Steele, who likened himself to the Angel of Death, fired 8 shots at close range at their victims, who sat waiting in a Range Rover on the track in Rettendon near Chelmsford. The pair gunned down Patrick Tate, 37, Anthony Tucker, 38, and Craig Rolfe, 26, all from Essex, with cold and merciless efficiency, during a festering row over a smuggled shipment of poor quality cannabis. As the jury of 8 women and 4 men returned unanimous guilty verdicts, Holmes and Steele shook their heads. When they were sentenced, they again protested their innocence. The judge recommended they should serve a minimum of 15 years. Holmes, a mechanic, and Steele, an engineer, had denied the murders at Rettendon on December 6, 1995. The jury had spent 5 days deliberating at the end of a trial which lasted more than 4 months and cost an estimated £1.5 million. The following newspaper article comes from the Evening Echo, dated the 21st of January 1998, with the headline, Key Witness, I'm a Liar. There were 9 long weeks of prosecution evidence for the Old Bailey jury to mull over, but among the dozens of witnesses who took the stand, only one Darren Charles John Nichols offered a link between Holmes and Steele and the murders. He was a brave choice for a star witness. Now aged 32, he was already a known criminal sentenced to 3 years in prison for conspiracy to distribute counterfeit currency on November 19, 1992. He has also still to be sentenced on firearms and drugs offences. During 2 weeks in the witness box, he admitted he was a liar who had stitched up friends. He was also forced to admit that what he wanted was to see Holmes and Steele sent to jail. He met Steele in Hollesley Bay Prison in Suffolk in early 1993. The pair became friendly when they shared a cell. Nichols was released in May 1994 and they kept in contact. It was his claim that he was the unwitting getaway driver for the killings after he'd been arrested for them himself, which led to Holmes and Steele being charged with triple murder. But there were many discrepancies in the interviews Nichols gave to police. Perhaps the evidence that could have discredited Nichols the most was the allegation he had been involved with an Essex police officer dubbed corrupt by the prosecution. Nichols became involved with the policeman, known only as Detective Constable A in court, only weeks after the shootings, And according to the prosecution, they plotted to board a North Sea ferry and steal £150,000 being taken abroad to buy drugs. They also planned to make amphetamine and use it to set up two men who had displeased Nichols. The officer arranged for Nichols to sell drugs to customers, then pass on their names and details so he could arrest them and win promotion. Nichols told the senior officer about 60 kilos of dud cannabis, which he had dumped in a gravel pit, then blamed two innocent men for putting it there. The officer let Nichols receive a £400 reward for his public spiritedness over the cannabis, and they bought drinks together to celebrate. If you would like to learn more about the Range Rover murders, then click on the video in front of you now. You will also see the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. Many thanks for joining me for this video. I look forward to seeing you all again for the next one. Take care. Cheers.